Okay, Burnsville Psych. Today we're going to be talking about social learning, and we're going to make this one, do a quick one today. Social learning, we've been talking so far about learning in a couple of different formats. We said that classical conditioning was learning that happens through association. We said that operant conditioning was learning that happens through consequences. Today we're going to be talking about social learning, and this is learning that happens. Oh, that didn't highlight. This is learning that happens through observation and imitation. Observation and imitation. So, when we are talking about social learning, we are looking at other ways that psychologists see us as humans learning. So, the two kinds that we're going to be dealing with during this unit are cognitive learning and modeling. And really, cognitive learning is going to be next week. So, today, most of what we're going to be talking about is the idea of modeling, and we'll get into some of Bandura's work. Cognitive learning is really how our memory works, how we process information, and that'll look a lot like the kinds of things that teachers know and teachers talk about. We'll do that next week. For today, let's talk about this idea of observation and imitation and social learning. One of the things that changed the way psychologists think about learning is this concept that we will know as latent learning. And basically, what they said was, if Skinner and the operant conditioning psychologists are correct, and that we need consequences in order to learn, how do we explain learning that happens without reinforcement? So when you look at some of the work that they do with rats, they put them in a maze, and eventually they figure out how to work their way through the maze, and there's no cheese or reward there, there's no punishment there, and rats will still learn the maze. This idea that we learn even though there might not be reinforcement. And sometimes, you don't see that that learning has even happened right away. It's not until later when there's some reason that you would need to kind of show that you've learned something that it'll show up. This happens all the time. We are constantly learning, and we might not even be aware of the fact that it's happening until at some point we come along and there's a reason that we would need to know something, and then it'll show up and go, oh, apparently I have learned this. That idea, latent learning. Another idea that's related to this idea of social learning is this concept called learned helplessness. And this is an idea that is troubling in a sense. And the quick version of this is that people develop a belief that what they do does not make a difference in their life or in their environment. So learned helplessness. We have, the little engine that could over here, who doesn't believe that he can anymore. People that have developed a learned helplessness have this belief that they don't have control over their environment. They don't have control over what happens to them. That if good things happen, then it's because of luck, not because I'm talented or skillful. It's because it was just my day. If bad things happen, it's because something about them is wrong. Okay. Generally, when psychologists talk about learned helplessness, they talk about these three ideas. They say that it is stable, it's global, and it's internal. So if learned helplessness is stable, it means that it's something that is ongoing. It's not a temporary situation. If psychologists talk about learned helplessness as global, it means that it's not specific to one area, that it's not that I'm just not good at that particular task, it's that I'm just dumb or I'm not good overall. And if it's internal, the idea is that this negative trait is somehow coming from me, that it's specific to me, that it's not someone else's fault. So if a person develops learned helplessness and they don't have the sense that they have control over their environment, this is a bad situation. If you think about what teachers do and what I'm all about, this is the last thing that I want to see um, people do. So where did this come from? The research that they did, I'll be using my little dog here. The research they did on learned helplessness comes from this concept called the shuttle box. This is the shuttle box. And they would take a dog and put it in the shuttle box, and the red lines on the floor are supposed to represent kind of an electrified grid, so that if they wanted to, they could shock the dog through the floorboards on either side of this shuttle box. This is my sad attempt at drawing a little fence that was in between. So they had two different variations. They had one version where the dog was free to move, and he would jump back and forth over this fence. So if they shocked to the floor on this side, the dog would jump over the fence to this side, probably not backwards. But he would escape the shock, and he'd learn that if they shock this side, then the dog can jump over the fence and escape the shock. That's one variation. The other variation, which is not quite as nice, let me find my pen again. Um, the dog was tied to the fence. That's supposed to be like a leash with the dog, okay? So now when they shock the floor on the left-hand side of the shuttle box, the dog can't escape because he's tied up, and eventually he quits trying to avoid the shock and just would lay down on the floor and take the pain. Um, when they took both versions of these dogs and brought them into a new situation, and there's no leash involved anymore. Um, the dogs that were in the first place where they learned that they could escape the shock, they would shock the floor again. The dog would escape. The second group of dogs that had previously been tied up but are now free, they can escape. When they shock them, they just lay down and take the pain. So what psychologists determine is that if these dogs learned that their actions did not make a difference in their environment, they would not try to escape the pain of the shock. Same kinds of demonstrations done with people, not so much in terms of electric shock, but given tasks that they either could solve, like a puzzle that they could solve or could not solve, and people that were in the unsolvable puzzle condition, when they're given a new task later, would spend far less time trying to solve the puzzle because they figure that, again, their actions do not cause a difference. So they give up very easily. What does this look like in school? This is not a good thing in school. If you believe this, would there be a reason to do homework? Why would you study? There's no reason to do any of those things if your actions don't cause a difference. Only people that think that my studying will actually improve my test score are the ones that will do that kind of work. So the nice thing about this idea, if there is a nice thing, is that if you can learn helplessness, you can actually undo this and learn optimism. And a lot of this has to do with mindset. So what I try to do when I meet students who kind of think like this is to try to help them see that, in fact, they do have some control over their environment, and that good things can happen if they basically put in some work. All right, last thing, let's talk about Bandura quickly, and then we'll do some more with this in class today. Albert Bandura is a name that you need to know. He's a pretty famous psychologist, and one of his best known studies, is this idea related to modeling and aggression. And so basically, Bandura is one of the social psychologists who says that we learn by observing other people and by imitating what we see. And if you think about little kids, if you've ever seen kids play house, that's what's going on. They are learning by imitating the people around them. They watch what their parents do, and then they play and role play and imitate some of the things that they've seen. Um, so the genius of Bandura was, can we use modeling to get kids to change behaviors? And so the research was on this Bobo doll, which if you look at these pictures down here, it's this kind of clown thing. It's one of those toys that was heavy at the bottom and it's inflatable. So when you punch it, it'll tip over and then spring back up. I think many of us have had a toy like this when we were kids. He calls it a Bobo doll because looks like a clown. So what he had what he had set up was there's the model, who's this woman, and she shows the kids how she's playing with this doll, basically by beating on the thing and knocking it over and hitting it with different items. Kids watch this video, they observe, and then they go into a room and there's all different toys that they can play with. And what they record in this research is the kids basically, again, imitating the actions of the model, the adult model. And so what we end up with is this idea that aggression is something, if modeled, will be imitated. Okay, the kids playing with this doll get pretty rough. What does this mean for us when we think about aggression? When we think about the kinds of modeling that happens in our society, when we think about TV and video games and some of the violent media that exists, does that have an impact on kids? Bandera would say yes. The American Psychological Association would say yes. All of this research exists that says that that kind of violent media does impact how we behave in subtle ways and in maybe not so subtle ways. So that's it for today. We will do a little bit more with media tomorrow in class. Um, if you have any questions, especially as it relates to Bandura and modeling, bring those with you and we can deal with it tomorrow. Have a good night.